Welcome, podcast listeners and viewers, and thank you for joining us on the Lightwave Digest podcast, episode 5. We are here to bring you all the news, reviews, interviews on everything Lightwave and beyond. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Hello, and today I'm actually joined by Andrew.
Hello there.
Hello there. You actually sound like Obi-Wan Kenobi from the prequels when you say that.
I'm not entirely sure that was not unintentional, I'll be honest. Hello there.
Yeah.
I can't do it properly.
So, first of all, I just want to mention that, well, as you can see in the title, we have Kevin Q. Cotter as the guest, and that is going to be me and Shabazzy doing that interview. But for this news and chit-chat section, I have Andrew Comb again with me. And I just wanted, before we go into the stuff that has happened in Lightwave Land, because a lot has happened, what have you been up to the last month?
Personally, not a lot. I have been very busy with work and having nights out and fun with friends as well. But nothing exciting Lightwave-wise. Nothing I can talk about anyway. Ooh. So, but very busy with work. So, lots of interesting and exciting things there. Sadly, I don't use Lightwave at my main job. I do website stuff, which I'm currently in the process of building a new e-commerce platform. So that's taking quite a lot of my working day up. And yourself, how is your work going?
Yeah, well, I'm quite busy right now on the new Star Wars game that we are developing at Ubisoft. And on that note, let's go to the news.
Yes, there has been some exciting news this week. Yes, well, what's been going on this week then? I think something
not
yes.
Not just this week, this month.
It has been a very exciting couple of weeks, especially for those who've been involved with the, those who backed Lightwave, got a little sneak peek a week before everybody else, but the rest of it went live, and that was a crazy time because Discord did not cope very well with that many people all trying to watch the stream at the same time. But I see that as a good thing too, because there was a lot of interest and a lot of people were very excited and very, happy about what was going on. So happy times. So what have they revealed?
Well, before we actually reveal or talk about what they have revealed, actually there was this very new Lightwave reel coming out, which is called the Animation Reel, which was kind of fun for me to watch because, when it comes to character animation stuff, Lightwave can absolutely do a certain level of character animation. But I'm working 18 years now at Ubisoft with, Maya and also Houdini. You can do so much more in those packages than what Lightwave can actually do for when you need to do photorealistic human beings and all that stuff. But looking at that reel, I actually giggled a little bit because there's so much fun going on there. It's very designed animation that really works well with what Lightwave can provide. And I think that the only person that when it comes to photoreal humans is Chris Jones. He's the only guy that I've seen that actually made Lightwave look better than the competition at the time when he did that stuff. Or very close, or at least on the same level. So a huge props to Chris for his talents, because it shows that Lightwave can do it, but is it as intuitive and as fast as you can do with other tools that are specialized for character animations, such as Maya? I really hope that's one of the things that NewTek, or not NewTek, Lightwave Digital will look at some point. But that really,
it's such an old habit to break, that, isn't it?
yeah, it is. Yeah, I will probably say NewTek for a long time going forward here. But yeah, looking at that animation reel, it actually tells me that Lightwave can do a lot of the animation that is needed in production all over the we know special effects like spaceships and all that stuff. Lightwave has been the go-to for so many years for that sort of stuff, like hard surface animation stuff. Lightwave has been really good for that. It lacks a little bit in the character animation things, but yeah, looking at that reel, it looks really good. It's as I said, I was like, it brought some fun back into my brain when I watched that. So,
oh, absolutely. I mean, we all know if you're a big enough Lightwave fan, I think you can be honest about Lightwave's limitations, and I'm fully aware that it's rigging and animation for like character animation leaves a lot to be desired. There's a lot of things. I mean, there's some excellent things in it that do help, but it's just lagging quite badly. And I'm like yourself, I hope they do polish it up. There certainly wasn't any mention of it in the new stuff, not yet, although they did specifically say there are a lot of features that have not been announced yet.
yes, that is true. But let's move on to actually talk about what we saw. So, one of the things that they have decided to do is that with Lightwave 2023, you actually get a copy of Chronosculpt.
Yes, it's apparently going to be updated to have support the latest file format, because I think it was a little outdated. It doesn't support the LWO3 in the last version, which is a bit of an incompatibility problem if you understand what the problem is there. That should bring it up to speed, but I think that's all about the time they've had to do with it. So it's not going to be a major upgrade or anything, but it'll just make it compatible, which means that you can use it with the next version, because obviously I don't believe they're going to regress back to LWO2, as despite some people might want that to happen. But it's certainly, yes, it should make it usable and help with sims and stuff. It's a problem that most software suffers from. Oh dear, my little bit of tiny glass is shattered on the floor and just refuses to stop wobbling. So that's why they invented it, and it's still relevant today. Maybe, just maybe, if you're like a super clever person, you can fix those things in the app that you're working with. But the Chronosculpt was a fantastic tool when they first invented it, and still is relevant today. So I think there'll be a lot of people who'll be pleased with that. So the text tool, yes, that's quite interesting. It's quite early days yet, so we can't tell how many features it's going to have, but it will basically has quite a lot of features already. You can separate each of the letters into its own little bone, animate those separately. That's quite cool, which means it'll work with physics. And they give a little bit of an example of that working, which is really nice. It generates all of its own geometry and surfaces, so you can do that in layout without having to do any modeling operations. And it's part of the whole, without being any spoilers about what else we're going to be talking about, the whole kind of procedural thing that Lightwave's starting to support now, where certain things you can do procedurally directly in the interface in layout without having to actually go into Modeler and do any destructive modeling, which is very exciting times. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was blown away by the fact that if you don't you know, the bones essentially they allow you to sort of select the bone and you know, keyframe animate the different letters, right?
Yeah.
But if you are going to, let's say, have this dynamic thing going on, you actually don't need the bones because all of
No.
them are essentially parts of an object. And the cool thing here is also that if a director comes in and say, "Hey, let's change the text from Lightwave to Lightwave 3D," you can do that, and it updates, and everything is updated. You know, it's a very non-destructive workflow.
Yeah. I mean, I think this then segues nicely into the what they're calling ProGeo, which means procedural geometry.
Yeah,
So what does that entail? So basically, it works similar to the way that VDB works in Lightwave. If you're familiar with that, they basically have the VDB tools which allow you to do like retopology, merge two objects, boolean them together. But it's using a voxel-based system, whereas this is actually a native system which just does regular geometry, not voxels. So one of the most impressive demos I thought was where they Deuce's little demo, which was wonderful, where it showed in real time being generated a sort of 3D slice through an arm.
oh yeah, the skin going off.
The skin being revealed, you know, like a sort of a CSI, you know, like what would
Yeah,
happen if you removed the skin from this person and you revealed the bones underneath. Now, tricks like that would be horrendous to do without actual geometry. You know, there's been, you know, like you can in some renderers they do a like clever sort of clip map type scenario. There was a third party plugin that does this, but this is just pure geometry, so you don't have to worry about it. What's really nice about the tools is that this sort of interactive boolean is working preserving UVs. So it doesn't destroy or trash the materials when you're destroying the model, as it were. Oh, one of the other features, I'm jumping ahead, aren't I? Their support for the Unreal Engine. So imagine being able to take a live Boolean animation sequence and export that directly into Unreal in their new real-time translation, which is rather exciting. I'm loving the big top-down, you know, thinking that they're doing. That they've got a lot of this system is all interconnected. You know, this will support this. This will then help this. This will help this. The procedural geometry also does instancing. And it's got quite complicated maths functions. There was some really interesting examples showing like making, what was it, the L system, where you take a mathematical formula that generates a series of lines which can then be meshed.
we have mentioned the Unreal Bridge. The one thing that it showed last minute was that you can actually now surface in layout and
Yes.
actually get that surface into Unreal, which is super cool. But yeah,
Yes, I mean, it's early days. They haven't shown all of these new features very in depth, but basically the idea is that you can create, change, move around, edit, animate, and all of that data is sent more or less real time across into the Unreal Engine, and you know, it's so you can use their tools. You can either take that as a sequence that you could use in a game or a project, or do what a lot of people do and use it like as an ArchViz tool, you know, because Unreal will create a, you know, a fantastic 3D environment and you can walk around it in real time.
another cool thing that I didn't actually expect at all is the Apple Silicon support. So, you know, Apple,
Yes.
they have moved from different hardware. They used to be 68K like the Amiga, and then they moved on to PowerPC, and then x86, and now on ARM, and now they were actually supporting the M1 and M2 directly in Lightwave
Yes.
instead of having to do emulation. which is super, super cool. 51% increase in render speed.
That's right. Yes.
And
So that's gonna be a huge thing, because I know a lot of people during the dark times when Lightwave wasn't being made, and it was always a little bit like, is it going to work on ARM? And surprisingly, it does. But obviously, having a native solution, because Apple does have a habit of just suddenly deciding to drop things, so they might have went, oh, no more Intel software support, gone. That's the type of thing they've done in the past, where they've just suddenly stopped supporting something. So for the future of Lightwave on the Mac, that's a huge thing. And obviously native is better, not running under emulation, which is impressive. It works, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
It just emulates seamlessly, but it's obviously always going to be faster to run native code, and that's a huge thing. And there's talk about potentially, but not immediately, going to Linux as well.
Oh yeah.
Which is a can of worms, because Linux isn't really one entity; it's lots and lots of flavors. But if they can get a one that works on, the big ones, as a sort of like like there's like I'm not even sure these days. I think Sorn would be a good one to ask. He seems to be more on Linux. The various flavors that are current, the flavor du jour. But a lot of VFX houses, have Linux builds, because basically you're managing to squeeze every last cycle of your CPU or GPU on the effect, rather than the overhead of Windows. Linux is very lightweight and not very demanding.
Yeah.
And plus some people just don't want to live in that the Windows Apple duopoly, and they want to move away and be in the Linux ecosystem. So that's fantastic news for them.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about computing speed and rendering speed, there are some news about Octane as well.
Yes, exciting news.
Yeah, apparently the plugin for Octane that exists right now, that works with Lightwave 2023, it's going to be shipped with Lightwave 2023 with some updates to it. And it's going to be absolutely free of charge.
Yes, because previously you had to pay for the plugin that allows Octane to interface with Lightwave, but now it's going to be free and updated and maintained, as far as I understand it, by Lightwave themselves. I think that's probably because they're huge Lightwave, Octane fanboys, and loads of people in the in the Lightwave community love Octane, and so that's massive news for everybody.
Yeah, that's a big one, to be honest.
There's a lot of people that I think, if it hadn't have had an Octane update, might have spat the dummy and wouldn't be interested. So it's very important that it's supported, and I think everybody's quite excited about that.
Yeah.
And talking about other third parties, apparently they've included quite a few third party tools. We don't know what they all are yet, but one of the big ones is OD tools.
Oh, yeah.
So for anybody that doesn't know what that is, Oliver Hotz at Origami Digital used to be very, very close in with Lightwave. He's since moved on. Lightwave had its problems. We all know what happened. It closed down. He's moved on. He now is a super big fan of Houdini. He's still very, very active in that community. But he has given, I think they've been purchased by Lightwave, all of his tools, so they can be continue to be supported, and hopefully fully integrated, which is, if you've used Oliver's tools, there's some amazing tools built in there, but there's so many of them. And I think when he originally built them, the idea was to show new tech, as was how to do this. These are some systems that you should do, but what he couldn't do was fully integrate them into the software because Lightwave's not that flexible. You can run a plugin, but you can't make it sort of like appear if you do a certain thing. There's a limit to it, and so what there's a lot of these features that should be part of the native. That was his idea, and hopefully that's what's going to happen. So watch this space. There's so many amazing tools that he created that might just be rolled into and become native features, as well as the other ones which will take a little bit longer to integrate will just come as Python scripts, which is how he built them all.
Guys, Ben is back. That's big.
It is a big thing. It's funny because going full circle and talking about your next guest upcoming, talking about the Amiga, I remember, my first memory of Ben Vost, and I have met him in person, which is lovely, a lot later, a few years ago. But my first memory, I remember him being the editor for, Amiga Format.
Oh, yeah. Instancing.
The new mode for instancing, which a lot of people are very excited about, is painting. The main thing that I'm taking away from that, two things. One is it's a brush system, so you can now paint on a piece of geometry, subdivided meshes. You could build yourself a mountainside and then just paint on thousands of trees with a brush. It works with an eraser as well. And you can have, because the instancing system allows you to have multiple weighted random amounts. So say you could have 50% of this tree and 20% of that tree and then a load of rocks. And then just go, 10% rocks, and then just start painting all over a mesh, and it'll just start scattering these features all over a mountainside. And the best part of that, the second part I was going to mention it, that unlike the normal instancer, it's actually got code for making sure that they don't overlap.
Yeah.
Which is I've been asking for that since day one. Since you go, what about the overlapping? And they just haven't fixed that. So now the new thing comes built in, automatically just doesn't have an overlap. You tell it a radius, and none of the instances will basically go within that radius of another instance. All real time, while you're painting it, so you don't have to do any kind of pre-calc or anything like that. It just works, and the demo they gave was fantastic, and I think people are gonna really respond to that. That looked like a massive feature.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's some amazing changes and advancements coming up. There's still more surprises to come. What's next?
Well, next thing is, of course, the interview with Kevin Quattro, or Kevin Q Quattro, and that is going to be with me and Shabasi. I really hope you guys will enjoy that one.
Fantastic. I hope I will have to. I haven't heard it yet myself, so I will be watching it when you guys watch it. Or maybe I have a sneak preview. I don't know. Maybe it's one of the two. Enjoy.
Yes, enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's guest. This guy has seen more visual effects shots than anyone else on the planet, maybe. And he's been working on so many iconic shows, TV shows during the heydays where Lightwave was the number one package to do 90% of the TV visual effects. Nowadays, he's mostly known for his poorly and underproduced podcast, or YouTube channel, I should say, that is called Hold and Modify. Welcome, Q.
Thank you for having me. Yes. Q here with Hold and Modify, YouTube's most poorly produced, underproduced Amiga channel.
Yeah, there we have it. Nice. But yeah, before we sort of go into all the cool stuff that you have been doing, and also maybe we can talk a little bit about what you're doing nowadays as well with Lightwave, but can you take us back to that moment, when you were a young kid and you started to, discover computers, and what were those computers, and take us back I guess games were involved in some way as well.
We've got to go back in time now, very long ago, during a time of ancient things. So video games, everyone's always like the video game side of what gets folks like myself. I was I was never a good artist, right? The conventional painter or 2D type person. And it was video games, going to the arcades and Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and Galaga and seeing these digital things bounce around on the screen, and it kind of got my head working on it, and that's kind of pulled me into the computer. Like, how do I get that at home? Well, there's the Ataris, there's these personal computer things you can get that maybe even let you make your own game, which I thought was an interesting idea. But I didn't know I was not smart enough back then that I would not be able to make my own game. I tried, but it didn't really work out too well using the old Commodore 8-bit computers. But in that process, I did discover other tools that you would use to help make video games, which was 2D paint programs that the computer would do. So I'm like, I can't really draw with pencil or paint by hand, but pushing around this little cursor with a joystick and eventually a mouse and having the computer kind of help me draw all the little dots and lines, that started to click in my head of like, whoa, there is a way for me to convey some kind of, artistic intent, and I can get my artwork out there, and the computer's going to help me. Even something as simple as the fill tool, where I can just draw a circle and it will fill it with color, and I can move on to the next thing. That's what kind of got me going. And then, of course, movies started coming out. I was born in I'm going to age myself. I was born in 1973, and I didn't get to see Star Wars when it first came out. I was too young. I had to see Star Wars the second run it came out, and of course, like most, I saw that opening shot, and it really started getting me to think. I was then introduced to reruns of Star Trek, the original series. That got me going. And then, of course, the whole 80s, the golden era of Buck Rogers and the original Battlestar Galactica and Knight Rider and Airwolf and all these shows coming out. And it really got my head thinking. And then right around that same time, we were introduced to things like Tron and The Last Starfighter, and also Popular Science Magazine. And on Popular Science Magazine, after watching Tron and then in between Tron and Last Starfighter, they come out with some issues with these really, really realistic looking images on the cover of the magazine. And I wish I had those, as unfortunately I don't. And I found out they were done on this Cray computer with the software. And I was like, well, this is really different from the traditional 2D software I've been playing around with, drawing lines and circles and stuff. This is letting you create these 3D environments, and the computer is helping you a lot by doing the shading and helping with the lighting. And I thought, this is perfect. And this looks a lot like what I was seeing in that movie, I think. And that's when I finally made the connection that, there's this thing called computer graphics, like CGI, and that kind of started to snowball in my head of what do I need to do to get to that point. And obviously, it wasn't going to happen on a Commodore 64. So there was definitely a lull in my life where I just kind of played video games and kind of had to wait around for technology to catch up.
Okay. So I guess how old were you at this time?
So that would have put me, that whole era would be like age 8.
Okay.
Yeah, probably to 12 before we started getting into the more modern computers that would kind of take me to that next phase.
So essentially computer games and then dreaming about the stuff that you...
Yeah, the whole being like my eyeballs were just being assaulted by Hollywood and game companies showing me all this cool stuff. I was like, how do I do this? How do I become part of this?
Oh, yeah, okay. So you started thinking, that's quite early to start thinking about, this can be a career, right?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess look, I did want to be a fireman. I did want to be, wanted to join the Army and fly helicopters at one point. So I did go through kind of your traditional kid things. I wanted to be a construction worker and work on high rises. So I did go through those things, right? But ultimately, I kept getting pulled back to, wow, spaceships go boom. That's really cool. You
as you said, you played games and dreamt stuff, and then I guess you sort of stumbled into the Amiga at some point.
Well, yeah, what happened with that is that, so time has moved forward, and I've got this Commodore 64 computer, and it's fine. And I used a program called Doodle with Doodle Paint, and I was drawing like 2-dimensional isometric, I think I'm using the right word, views of like vehicles and things, just kind of trying to fill that little urge I had, but I wasn't able to do what I saw in the movie still. And of course, by now more awesome movies had come out using a combination of early computer graphics and of course conventional model work. And a buddy of mine had a magazine when I was in 9th grade, so I was probably 13 or 14 years old.
Oh yeah, okay.
It was it was an issue of Amiga World magazine, and it had a ad for of course, a video game, a F-18 flight simulator. I don't know if I actually have that one on my wall over here, but and I was amazed. I was like, wow, that almost looks real. We always use that term at the time, right? It almost looks real.
Yeah.
And it was this bunch of solid shaded filled F-18 game, and anyway, that led to him explaining to me what the Amiga was. And it was like, oh yeah, it's Commodore. It's the same people that make your 64. And I was like, wow, okay. So where can I get one of these? And he's like, yeah, you go get this Amiga 500. So in the States, the Amiga 500 was the first kind of mainstream Amiga. And I kind of just went all in on it and got a monitor and the computer, got it home, got a bunch of games for it, and then immediately started looking for software to do graphics on it. Now, at this point, this is still early enough that there's no Babylon 5 yet. There's no Space Above and Beyond or Secret. None of that stuff is out yet. So this is still way early. And it was just me trying to figure out how to create 3D. And there was some very early 3D programs on the Amiga that I discovered that started to look like what I was seeing on the movies. But that little Amiga 500 of mine, it's a very entry-level system. It had half a mega memory. It couldn't do anything with the 3D. And I kind of got bummed out. I was like, oh, I spent all this money on this computer and I really still can't do what I want to do. More time goes by and I was able to upgrade to an Amiga 3000 that had the 25 megahertz 6830, and I put more RAM in. I think I put a whopping 4 megabytes of RAM in it. I got a DC TV, and that's when I started flirting with 3D software. And I started on Imagine, I believe it was 2.0 from Impulse. And it was a very complicated piece of 3D software. It was the manual was not very well done, and I understand his intent. He was kind of being funny in his manual, but that was my crucible into 3D, trying to figure out how to learn how to model. Like, people ask me, do you model? I don't model. To this day, I don't like doing it, but that was the first natural step, was learning how to model. And then eventually figure out how to apply materials and render in this program, Imagine. But I was finally able to do it on my Amiga. I'm creating 3D stuff. And that's when rumors started popping up about this bread thing that was coming out from some company. And I was like, what are you talking about? And, we'd go to the computer store, because there really was no internet for me back at this point. You're talking 1990, 91-ish, And there was this rumor about this toaster thing, the bread thing, the toaster thing for the Amiga computers. And it goes in this big box 2000. And I was like, oh, I don't have a 2000, I have a 3000. Like, oh, you're not going to be able to use it then. I was like, oh, okay, well, all right. But I should check it out. And I went to the computer store and saw the classic video toaster demo and was like, oh, that's neat. It does some fun stuff. I don't really care about that stuff, though. And then I got to the Lightwave part. And for any of those who've watched the original demos they put out, they're always a lot of fun. The narration is classic, and when it gets to that point and they show the Lightwave, the ball, and it turns into the Earth and all this stuff, and they start going all over the Lightwave stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I have to get this software. Well, you can't get the software key. You have an Amiga 3000. Oh, well, what's other software that kind of can do what Lightwave can do? So I started looking at other pieces of software, desperately trying to find something that was similar to that, and I just couldn't find it. I would try all this other software, all this 3D software that was available at the time, and now we had a bunch of stuff available. There was like at least 5 or 6 3D programs in the Amiga.
Yeah.
And none of them were as fluid or smooth or worked as logical as the Lightwave one did. Like, there's a great example where they target the lights and the camera, everything to like a null, and or a ground plane, and they move it around, and they're all automatically following it. And you just use your mouse to like look around and look up and down, and it's all very simple. There's not a lot of hotkey dancing to do. And I mean, this is a simpler time, of course, for 3D software, but it just registered, it clicked. I felt like a camera guy with a camera on my shoulder in that program. And so how I got to actually use it was I went to an Amiga store and basically became a bum. I just hung out and kind of friended everybody up and sat down and talked to customers. And sometimes the owner didn't really appreciate that, but as I sat there and absorbed all of this information, reading the magazine, seeing the new software coming in, sitting on their toaster system after hours and just diving into Lightwave and firing it up and going onto BBS boards and talking to other people about how to use this new Lightwave toaster software. What did you know it could do this? Could you try this trick? And just basically going to college for 3D animation at this computer store, because I didn't have a lot of money. I was borderline homeless at that point. So it was a way for me to kind of on my own learn this Lightwave software, which was making it really easy to learn 3D animation software. And that's when things like the Babylon 5 started popping up, Deep Space Nine. And that's when I started getting really excited, because I was thinking, oh, wow, there's about to be a big explosion of television visual effects, I think, with this kind of like off-the-shelf software that's going on here. And then when the Babylon 5 came out and they were showing the pilot being done in the Amiga, and then even some of the first season, and then the other shows that started coming up, and I was like, this is it. I've got to get off my butt and get I guess they call it a demo reel. I got to start rendering stuff and animating stuff and putting it together and trying to get it to Hollywood so I can get a job, right? And that was kind of the transition point right there for me.
Sorry, where were you at the time?
Oh, where was I?
Yeah, where were you? Where was your locale?
Oh, I was actually in Michigan, the suburbs of Michigan. So,
so you were well north then. You weren't actually anywhere near Hollywood at the time.
No, I was in southeast Michigan, almost as far from Hollywood as you could be. And the only grace about Michigan was that it was a really awesome video market. We had a lot of folks involved in video production, and I don't mean just things like weddings and bar mitzvahs and stuff, but actually trying to shoot commercials and make little movies and things like that. And we had a local connection, learning Lightwave and getting involved deeper and deeper into it. Started going to meetings monthly. I don't want to call them like monthly Amiga meetings, but it was monthly 3D artist meetings. So we'd get in there and everyone would show their work. You'd either show it as a printed material or you'd show it on VHS if you were fortunate enough to have the ability to get your animations to VHS and show it to somebody. I was doing it kind of using my DCTV. But there was a couple of people that used to show up to these meetings. One of them you may know, one of them you might not know, but Dale Myers, who was basically the kind of the Lightwave Yoda of our group. He had proven himself with a documentary on a JFK assassination using the Amiga. He had done some work, I think, on Unsolved Mysteries. He's kind of like our little local kind of famous Lightwave guy. And more importantly, though, he had gone off to the West Coast, I believe Oregon and not California, and helped establish the original M&M animated characters, the little M&M M&M candies. He helped get their pipeline set up for that. Now, I always want to say, I try to avoid naming names because I'm really bad at remembering them, but I will name Dale because he is kind of instrumental in kicking my career off, because he would come back to these meetings and say, hey, what are you guys doing? There's a whole industry blowing up in the West Coast right now. They need 3D artists. So what are you guys all just sitting around here for? And I would show him like my renders on paper that I did. I would print them on paper and show them to him. And he goes, Kevin, this is great. Your work looks fine. You need to get this animated and moving and get on videotape and send it out there. You need to get your butt going. And I was like, okay, Dale, I'll do that. So he's kind of instrumental in that part. The other gentleman who used to show up in these groups on occasion was John Tyndall, by the way. So he would show up. He would show off some of his fun new toys he was programming and whatnot. That was kind of a neat thing. But yeah, so Dale got me kicked in the butt. I borrowed basically, I had to leave the Amiga era behind now because I had to move on to the PC era. I got my first Windows machine so that I could get off my butt and start making render and frames, get animation going. And of course, PCs were much, much faster now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they also had capture cards and MPEG cards so you could output videos to VHS. And that's what I started doing. I started rendering and animating my butt off. And I'd say over a year of just, trial and error in cutting together a demo reel, I finally got something together that I felt, I don't know, it's not great, but maybe it shows that there's some potential. And I sent it off to the place that I wanted to work because they were advertising on the BBS forums. In fact, Adam Mojo Leibowitz was one of the people who had posted on those forums back in the day saying, we're looking for artists, send us your work. And I did. Went ahead and sent my tape in. And I would say I don't know, maybe a week later, I got a phone call, and there was a voicemail left on my phone on my answering machine from Ron Thornton, and I recognized his voice from watching the Lightwave training tapes. Immediately, I recognized his voice, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then I called them back, and they're like, "Yeah, we want to fly you out for an interview. We like your stuff and your tape, and we just want to see what's going on." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And that was like 1997 when all that happened, when all that unfolded. I
Oh,
had just
wow.
gotten married at that point too. So it was, it all happened pretty fast from the time Dale Myers yelling at me to get stuff on video and sending it out to California to getting a job and moving from Michigan to California.
Wow, cool.
So you would have been roughly about 24-ish.
23. It was 23 when I came in there. Yeah, it was January. Was it January 97, I believe? I'm always bad with the dates and time, but yeah, right around that time.
My gosh, I mean, around that to have that kind of opportunity open up to you at around that time, I'd probably say that was effectively the golden era of computer graphics. Getting into the industry seemed to be a lot more simpler back then.
There was numerous shows.
Yeah, it's very different now. It's very different now, dude.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, that was when I came in there. Of course, like I think most people that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the studio. They did Babylon 5. I mean, I love that show. I've been watching that show. It's awesome. And then of course they started doing Voyager, and I was watching Voyager at the time. And to be fortunate enough to get picked along with a lot of others, they hired a lot of people during that time, and we all got pulled into there, and it was awesome. It was a dream. Like I'm working on the shows that I watched now. That's so cool. But I didn't. When I got hired in, I didn't get to work on. Of course, Babylon 5 was off to Netter Digital at that point. That's where I think that's where Chris Sapara actually got one of his early starts in 3D, and they had Star Trek Voyager, and I would love to work on Voyager, of course, but I was the new guy, right? So I got put onto the animated movie from Warner Brothers, Batman Sub-Zero. It was one of the Warner Brothers cartoon DC movies, like the 90-minute movies they would do. And I got to animate the Batwing and some other stuff and learn how to do cell shading in Lightwave, something I had never encountered before in my life. So it was a great learning experience. And I didn't get to do any of the things that I thought I was going to work on for quite a while. It was like 6 months to a year before they finally started letting me play around with Voyager and getting into those things. But it was a fun time. You learn. I thought I learned a lot working after hours in a computer store, digging through manuals and tutorials. But when you're in a production environment like that, surrounded by not only new people that are just as eager to learn as you are, but some veterans, it was just an amazing experience. It was just learning every single minute that you were clicking that mouse.
Wow.
So when you were there at these studios and you saw the different people that was working with you, the experience levels, were they on par with you, generally speaking, across the board, or were there some people who actually knew their stuff?
So yeah, there was a good chunk of us that were all new, like me. So we were all learning. We all brought something to the table. I tend to get lean on it more for effects work. This is an early era, so they really kind of liked my eye for blowing stuff up or creating some weird new beam of the week for Voyager or some new weird space anomaly. That was kind of like my gag with Voyager is like, okay, Q, this week some kind of cosmic bow tie is going to attack the ship. I was like, think of something. I'm like, okay. But I did get to blow some stuff up. Blowing stuff up was actually a lot of fun. But so anyway, I was surrounded by a lot of folks at my level, but there was also the crew that had come up from the Babylon 5 era, who'd actually been working on multiple seasons of that show. So they had lots of years behind them already and lots of tricks and tips. So we had that group kind of like over here, over our shoulders, right? I'm never going to remember everyone's name. And if I only name like two of them, everyone's going to get mad at me. So we had this whole group behind us.
Yeah.
And they were there with their awesome skills. And some of them had left to go work on like film projects and then come back. So yeah, we had this great pool of just amazing folks to say, you're doing this the wrong way, or this is what you can do, or hey, you could try this. And we just kept learning from them. And as the longer I stayed at that job, We started hiring more what I would call experienced people, because the effects in television has been out for a couple of years now. So now there's people gaining experience, and we start pulling those people in, and we'd all share techniques. And it was literally mousing in front of the computer and just barking off to the side, like, hey, I need to get this null to track this thing so that this thing over here will invert itself. And someone's like, oh yeah, do this. I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. It just was totally a collaborative effort to get this stuff done. So
Amazing to hear that.
yeah, it was fun times. Yeah.
It just blows my mind to see or to hear you tell this story, and because I'm visualizing in my mind this guy in Michigan who is using Lightwave, putting together his. Was your reel before you sent it off? Was that essentially a spaceship reel, or was it like a flying logos reel?
It was kind of a mix. It was, it's on my memory. Let me pause. Now the good news is I actually have all of my original demo reels, even going back to 1990.
No way.
Yeah, going back to 1992. I have all of them. I've posted them, I believe, maybe on my personal channel on YouTube. I'm not sure, but I have them all. I'm just viewing them real quick. Yeah, so the demo reel that got me picked up by Foundation Imaging was predominantly action themed, space and vehicles, hardware, things like helicopters and submarines. And I had painstakingly modeled the USS Excelsior and did some animation and effects work with it. And I also did some Independence Day, the movie, the ID4 movie. I modeled the destroyer, the alien destroyer, and then downloaded from AmyNet, which was and still is a kind of a vault of stuff for Amiga, but they had 3D models on there, Lightwave models. So I downloaded a F-18 model. So I put that in my demo reel, and it was attacking the alien destroyer. So it was definitely a targeted demo reel. It was targeted for, Hollywood action type stuff. And I think that helped a lot, because once I got to Foundation, I saw my share of demo reels of, here is a bird sitting in a window with the light changing. And here is a ball rolling around in a circle with the light changing. And I'm like, okay, that's great. So unfortunately, and then to find out, oh, you paid $25,000 to go to a school for that. All right, well, that's good. That's fine.
And Kevin's like, well, get out of the way, you losers. Let me show you how a real now.
It does help to have a passion for it, doesn't it? If you really like what you do, and to have the eye, it's fun to find the people that have the eye for it. People can be taught. Of course they can be taught. Some people just never absorb it, and they don't have the eye for it. But once you find somebody who knows how to make that magic work, it's fun working with folks like that, because everyone's just so giddy to do the next thing, figure out the next thing.
Yeah.
So would you say then that your strength at that time, or your passion at that time, was to do more with animation or to do more with modeling?
Absolutely not modeling. It was what those early years taught me was that I do not want to do modeling, not ever. I don't want to do texturing and modeling. I really loved moving the camera around. I mean, I didn't quite have a name for it back then, like animatics or previs, but that was our blocking, shot blocking. I discovered that's what I like doing the most. I like setting the camera up, moving the players on the screen. I did like lighting a lot. I had a lot of fun lighting, and I did like doing effects work. Now, again, remember, this is a long time ago. This is, the effects work is today is on a whole different level. But back then, I really liked learning new tricks and tips to impress the boss, to impress the client. Hey, we need this to blow up, or this energy thing needs to do this, and just trying to figure out the gag. And I mean, we can move forward a little bit here. When I left Foundation and eventually ended up at Zoic Studios, which I spent the bulk of my, I would say, mainstream television VFX career at. On an episode of Firefly, we had to figure out how to do this fire snake. That's all it said in the script, fire snake. I'm like, a fire snake? Like a snake? Like a, like a, no. They're like, it needs to be a ball of fire that rages through the ship. And it kind of looks like a snake, because they were trying to apply science to it, and like, well, it's a vacuum and it's sucking all the oxygen out of the ship, but it's on fire. It's like, okay, so it's going to tunnel and swirl, and it's going to go down the stairs and go through the decks and eventually make its way out to the cargo bay. And I'm like, okay, did you guys shoot any elements for this? And, no. Okay. Because earlier in Star Trek Voyager, I had worked with Gary Hutzel, and he had shot some awesome fire elements, fire tornadoes, where he ran a fan and ignited flames, and it caused the fire to do this really cool like fire tornado effect. And I was thinking, well, that was a really cool looking effect, but he shot that, and I didn't really have access to that. I wasn't sure how I was going to make that steer and fly downstairs, and that was 2D, and the camera's moving in these shots 3-dimensionally. I'm like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I was figuring out gags like that out. It was terrifying, because the turnaround time of a television schedule is ulcer inducing, but it's that challenge of like, I'm going to use particle effects, I'm going to use hypervoxels, and I'm going to use settings and hypervoxels that make no sense to me, because I need to just kind of like chip away at it, sculpt at it, and see what it's going to do. And that's eventually how I figured out this fire snake gag. It was a lot of fun, and it put together, and the compositor I was working with did a really great job making it all work with the plates. But that was, I would say, effects work is what my passion was for a lot of those years. And then it all kind of changed when CSI came around.
Do you remember what version of Lightwave you were using for those effects when you were at Zoic?
Right. Think here for a second. So that would have been the version of Lightwave at Zoic. I believe we started with. I could be getting this completely wrong. I think 9.
Oh,
I think 9.
okay. So then, the only reason I ask is because for the effect that you were talking about, in my mind, I'm thinking how I would do it, and I'm thinking, yes, I would use hypervoxels. Yes, I would use particles, but I would also have used the wind path tool to direct the particles to basically to how you want it to go, because that's exactly what it does. So I didn't know which version of Lightwave you were using.
Right. That was, I believe,
that even possible.
Yeah. So that's a neat little thing. It kind of brings us into the CSI thing nicely too. So, and when I started being asked to shift over to CSI, which was fine because I loved watching the show back then, and I loved the whole zoom into the body, zoom into the prop, and see it all at macro level and stuff. That was kind of the CSI way. I thought that was fun stuff to do. It was always fun designing that. And when we first did the show, they would actually shoot props that they would snap zoom into, do the CSI zoom gag, and then we would add CG on top of it, right? But eventually they figured out that we were getting so good at lighting and creating these environments, these macro worlds, that they just didn't do that anymore. They would shoot like a master prop wide, and then we would do the digital zoom in and go into our CGI land and show organs and blood vessels and chunks of wood or whatever the heck it was, the inside of a VCR. We did a lot of blood vessel work, did a lot of blood cells floating in arteries on CSI, like way too many, to be honest. And we didn't have, so the version of Lightwave, this might be revealing, the version of Lightwave we were using at the time had the first version of Pathwind. There was like a mode where you could get particles to move on a path, but you were still keyframing, I believe, the emitter. The Pathwind wind didn't exist yet, I believe, in that version. I think it was one of those features that we kind of, maybe we co-developed, like because we're of course on the betas and trying to always ask Lightwave for new stuff, new toys to play with. But I remember at some point that Pathwind tool did show up, which made it very, very easy. It's almost kind of an early version of the spline tool that we eventually got, where you could just lay out a series of nulls. Basically, it was the wind, so you're creating the path with a wind tool and then shoving the particles down it, and then they would all go flying through the arteries, and yay, blood vessels, done easy. But this was also before instancing. Keep that in mind. This was before even third-party instancing. So I had to use the, gosh, I'm trying to remember all this stuff. I think it was the Point Clone Plus tool, or the one that was doing physical clones of the object to attach them to particles. But the bummer was that it was just static, right? So you do all these cells and they just kind of fly like this. So then they added the random rotation, spin, and scale. So now I could randomize their shape and sizes and make them spin when they're moving. That was neat. That was like a cool thing. But this was the version of Lightwave before clones were handled as copies or like instances. Still not true instancing, but it's been internally they changed the system where now the clones didn't take up as much memory and didn't slow Lightwave down as much, because it was it was like just making a memory copy of the cells. Then eventually, yes, we got third-party instancing plugins and we're able to do, more traditional instancing, and that changed the game as we moved on to different shows, Angel and CSI, and of course Battlestar, and moving forward in all the shows we worked on.
Yeah, that would be HD Instance.
Yes, that was the third-party one, HD Instance.
And then also one other question I had regarding CSI. Did you actually use Volumetric, the plugin, for any shots there?
So yes, that was again. This goes back to the fun discovery, right? We're jamming on the CSI show, and I always have to apologize to anybody I worked with back then because it was chaos. It was, and it's a combination of you're young, you're in it, you're working for a company that's winning Emmy awards almost every year or every other year,
Yeah.
and you're surrounded by all this super talent, and you're always just trying to do your best and trying to impress, and you're also looking for new fun ways to do things, and sometimes because of these timetables, you just help me. Why aren't you helping me? That's the attitude you get. And this tool, I don't even know how I found it. I don't know if it came up in a forum post or what, but there was this tool that, or maybe it was sent to us. I honestly don't remember. There was a tool, this Volumetric tool where it would take MRI or CAT scan slice data and visualize it into a 3D shape.
Yep.
And it was like, well, wait a minute, duh, this is awesome. This would be perfect for CSI. And, because this was before the 3D model of the male and female existed. That, I mean, it was really expensive, like $25,000 when it came out or something. It was a virtualized human model you could buy. So we were using like just stuff we had made up random stuff. Like I would make a bunch of blobs and call that the colon or the liver or the heart, right? I mean, it was just ridiculous what we were doing. And then now, like, we get the CT scan of someone's chest, and it's got ribs and blood vessels and hearts and organs and lungs. And I'm like, well, this looks great. And then you visualize it, you can give it color and data, and it looked awesome. Like, of course it's going to look great. It's real. It's like real data from a human body, right? So that saw a lot of use. What we did was we took a couple of scans, we used Volumetric to then export a mesh. So we did use Volumetric to render on occasion the actual pixels you would see in the show, but more often we would use Volumetric as a tool to get us a mesh of that data.
Oh yeah.
And then that mesh would become the thing we'd shade and modify in Modeler and make look better to better visualize the requirement for the shot. And that got used a lot. That was, talk about going back to the well. We must have used that mesh in dozens of episodes, just cutting it up and changing it. And it was a fun tool, and it's still it was still around. I think it's still around today for a long time, right?
It was actually Elmar who made it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I was waiting for someone to say something.
Yeah, it was Elmar who made it, and now he's the head of development for Lightwave Digital. So maybe we might see something. Maybe that is going to be incorporated at some point. Maybe I don't know.
Maybe that'd be. I mean, that stuff. I mean, the slice data. That's even a variant of course, like VDB and all that kind of volumetric type stuff too. That's out there. So all that stuff is. The whole grid-based type shading and data sets. Yeah, there's all kinds of flexibility and fun stuff that could happen from that.
Yeah.
So that's a good time.
Did you actually add any other 3D tools throughout the years, or compositing tools maybe?
So one of the things, the bulk of my time at Zoic being on CSI, a lot of what I did was still in camera, meaning I would either create the 3D models or another artist to create the 3D models, and I'd integrate them all into the shot, and I'd pretty much remember the turnaround times are so fast and the teams were small. It was literally myself, a compositor, maybe another 3D person to help out on the episode, but almost never the shot. It's almost always just going to be you. Like, you might get some initial assistance where they give you a model, but after that, it's up to you to get the shot just done, get it out.
Okay.
And the turnaround times were, previs Monday, approve Tuesday, rendering Wednesday, delivering Thursday and Friday, and then it just rinse and repeat, just never ending.
Yeah.
It's chaos. And so I did a lot of my CSI shots were all in camera, and then I would render matte passes to give to the compositor to tweak. So I
Okay.
would render like, so you mentioned any additional tools or third-party things. I used XDOF, which
Oh
was the
yeah.
early version. Yeah, early version of depth of field done in post, in camera, in Lightwave. Seems crazy to think who's rendering depth of field in camera, and who the heck renders depth of field in camera as a 2D post effect. I did on CSI for 8 years. What I would do is I would get the shot looking really cool. It's before we had the 64-bit the HDR pipeline, and we have to do all these neat little tricks to try and mimic or fake HDR look, that hot, wet look that, and the good deep contrast and saturated colors. And I put the depth of field on there and make it look all neat and cool. And then I'd do the same exact shot with a clown pass with just different colors,
Yeah.
so that the compositor could then color tweak my shot and get it balanced correctly before sending it to to go out to air. So that was the kind of the pipeline for a long time on that show and how I worked. And it kind of became, it just kind of became my thing. I definitely kind of became pigeoned, or I became a tool at that shop. Like that's what he does. Where any shows we have or things we need done that we know that he can just kind of handle in his little box over there, we're going to throw it his way because he's quick. And I was only quick because I had to be, because of the scheduling. So I was trained to be fast and get things turned around quickly. And that's kind of where that whole Q does everything in camera. Why does he do that? And I was like that for a lot of years. I was, oh, there's Q again doing something in camera, and his life would be easier if he would just learn to composite. But nope, not for a long time. I do composite now, but back then I spent most of my work on that at that company, doing it that way. In fact, Battlestar Galactica was probably the first time I couldn't do stuff in camera, where I was definitely part of a much bigger team where we had multiple artists working on a shot. So not just an episode, but you'd have multiple artists working on a shot. So that was a fun transition.
So one of the things that we at Massive Cinematics, we sort of use Maya and all that stuff, and then Lightwave 9 came out, and Lerny Ang developed this tool called Janus, the multipass render layering breakout thing. Did you guys ever use that?
So I was aware of that. I remember it was one of those things where we were clicking through forums and someone mentioned it, and I looked at it, and there might have even been a video or a short tutorial or something, maybe like an ad video for it. And it was one of those things I'd like, this looks really neat, but it almost seemed like, but this would involve like altering. There was a lot of tools out there that showed that they could help things, but we really mean a change in the pipeline, right? Changing how you had, how your team was doing stuff. And again, this leans back to, we were always in panic mode. And once we had something working, we didn't want to mess with it.
No,
So
true.
I didn't really use Janus. I'm not saying that no one at Zoic did. There, another artist you may interview someday will say, oh yeah, I use Janus, but I never used it. I kind of kept to the system, and we did have some custom tools we wrote to help submit jobs to the farm and automate the saving of frames and that kind of thing, and buffers. But those are mostly custom tools that were written in-house. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a shot I remember seeing on the New Tech forums when they show reels. I think this even is still on the New Tech YouTube channel. Well, the Lightwave Digital Lightwave YouTube channel now, of a CSI shot. I think it was something to do with like maybe promoting Lightwave 10. It might have been, but anyway, in that shot, it's a CSI shot where it's like a bullet time shot, and in that bullet time shot in this demo for demonstrating Lightwave, you see all of the cam going through, following this bullet through various different places, and you see all the different characters in the hospital being attacked by some kind of crazy villain or something like that. And I've always wondered, how on earth did they make that shot?
So now we
So
enter.
you need to tell you need to tell me how this happened.
Well, that has a really interesting history behind it. That whole sequence.
Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Oh, I do, and you're gonna get a nice little reveal here. So I've been working at Zoic for quite a while on CSI at this point. CSI, the original Las Vegas, CSI Miami, both shows back and forth, and even did some work on the pilot for CSI New York. And I'd been doing CSI for, at that point, it had to be 6, 7, 8 years now. I don't even remember. It had been a long time. And remember, I kept talking about the burnout. We're always turning episodes over and over and over. And we're always being asked to do the next cool thing. Like you go see a movie, and some cool movie gag is done, and if it's even close or something related that you could see on CSI, usually 3 to 6 months later, we'd be asked to do that. One of the earlier things was when the movie Kill Bill came out. There's a kind of a scene in there where you zoom into the gun and you see it like loading the round and the hammer firing on it and firing out the barrel. We saw that in the Kill Bill movie. I was like, oh, they're going to totally ask us to do that. And one of the shots I did with another friend of mine who worked there, and so we did that shot. And I was like, okay, so that happened a lot. We expected to be asked to do things that were done in movies on the TV show. Well, this time it was a commercial. I believe, I may get the vendor wrong, but I believe it was Philips Television, and they had this new super widescreen TV they were trying to sell. And I believe it was called Philips Carousel or something like that. You can look it up. And it was this slow-mo, frozen moment, kind of bullet time gag of the camera flying through this sequence, this frozen in time sequence for the commercial to advertise how awesome their widescreen TV is, right? I remember watching this, and I was sitting there in my office, and I was like, oh my God, they're going to ask us to do this on the show. They're totally going to ask us to do this. And it was this long, complicated bullet time, multi-layer camera flying in between and around things. And I'm like, how on earth, if they ask us, are we going to do this? So I don't know, flash forward 6 months, kind of forgot about it. Scripts show up for our episode, 2-parter, big one. And yeah, we want to do this frozen moment kind of tease showing the entire team under attack. It looks like they're all getting killed or they're going to die. And it's this cool frozen moment thing. Hey, you guys should reference this commercial by Philips TV. And we're like, oh yeah, no, I know about it. So it's going to be a big deal. We got a lot of money for this episode and we're going to have to do a lot. I'm like, and I, at that point was, again, doing an episode a week, sometimes a couple episodes a week with multiple shots on 2 shows. It gets to you. And I had gotten to the point where I was fried. And, many years in the show and just like, we had fun. I loved working on the show. I loved it to death. But it never seemed to get its acknowledgement. When the Emmys would come out, while I was fortunate enough to be involved in some Firefly and Battlestar episodes that got nominated and some that won, it's like CSI was just always kind of ignored. And I was like, kind of like, all right, well, that's cool. And I'm tired. And I basically, at that point, for that episode, I said, I think I'm done. I think I'm finally, this is going to be a major investment in time, and it's going to be a lot of long nights and a lot of setup, a lot of on-set stuff. And I was like, I'm going to pass the torch. I'm going to bow down. And if you guys need help, I'm willing to offer any kind of consulting work on the episode. But I'm going to move on to a different show here at Zoic. And that's what I did. I moved on to a different show, and they went ahead and picked up that episode, and the team did a great job. And yeah, I did a little bit of consulting work, helping on a couple things for shaders and materials and some ideas but it was a big deal. It was a huge project, and the whole team just knocked it out. And I was really impressed with the work they had done. It was actually spread over 2 episodes, that sequence. They come back to it in the second episode. And it was submitted for an Emmy, got nominated, and then won. I was like,
nice.
Great. Good for you guys.
After all your hard work, some other guys just it takes the Emmy.
No, I mean, it was earned, right? But it's not that I'm upset that I bowed out of the show just in time for the app that was finally going to get them the nod and then the win. It was like all the other stuff I had worked on for all the prior years, I guess just wasn't up to snuff. I was like, okay, maybe I should have quit. I guess I was supposed to quit. Now they can win. Oh, but no, it was such a great gag to see done on television. Like it was one of those ones where you're like, wow, a TV show did this? That looks cool. And it really did deserve it. The work was awesome. and the effect really looked cool. And even today, I go back and look at that sometimes. I'm like, man, that's pretty slick. And you're a big dummy. You should have stayed on the show. At least do that episode.
So for the actors, did they have like still? Did you see how they did it with the actors?
So yeah, let's get to the how do they do it, right? So what that involved was a lot of wire work and stand removal. So we put a lot of things on stands, and we just stick the item on a stand, and we'd have to paint the stand out. We had the actors in rigs, like wire rigs, to get them posed, and they just had to stay frozen, and shooting multi-pass on it, and then putting it back together, and then a lot of CGI enhancement, where lots of broken glass and bars and vials and walls and things to help the layer effect work. So a lot of roto work, of course, not just wire work, but the roto work to get the masks so we could put stuff behind the actors as the camera's flying through it. It was a massive undertaking. That team, when you look at, I wish I had that footage or that, the raw footage, but yeah, it's just seeing all those poor actors having to stay frozen as best they could. If you look closely, you can see a couple wiggles here and there. Of course, this is all done vastly differently today, but back then that was just getting it done. You've got a day or two to shoot it, so let's get through it. But yeah, just lots of wires and stands, clear stands too, propping people up and layering folks on top of folks and things on top of things to get that shot to come together.
Wow.
Did they use motion cameras, or did they just use still cameras to take the bullet time frames?
I believe there was a motion control camera in there, but there was a lot of handheld, just getting the guy. I mean, they would be on a dolly track, but just shooting it in one pass, and then, okay, you guys gonna wire removal and roto and layer in all the stuff to make it look like, all this other stuff can be added into it. So it was just it was complicated.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better answer for you, but not having worked on that episode, this is just what I saw over the shoulder, basically, as the other team members are working on it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I've just by looking at the footage itself, I'm doing what being the type of person I am. I try to pick apart the process. How did they do it? You just can't really help but see something on screen as they use this, they use that. How did they do this? And I'm looking at it, and for the life of me, I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out, did they actually model these actors in Lightwave and actually animate them as CGI characters, or did they actually use the live action like they really use the actors? I just couldn't figure out, because the composite is just so well done.
Yeah, it was all real actors. There was there's no digital doubles in that, and yeah, just a lot of painstaking rotoing and layering in elements and depth cues and just a miracle compositing work done. It was a big one.
Truly amazing work. Yeah. I just wondered as well. You moved from Foundation Imaging over to Zoic?
Yeah, well, there was a little bit of an in-between there. I went from Foundation Imaging to a video game company called Westwood Studios.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, they're very famous for a bunch of stuff, mostly the Command & Conquer franchise. RPG, they kind of invented the RPG, so to speak. Originally, they made some games on the Amiga, Dune, which was a RTG, and then carried on making RPGs, all the alphabets made, and it was a lot of fun because going to Westwood was another way to kind of flex my creativity in a different way. In a weird way, going to Westwood was almost kind of a prequel to what I'm doing today, where I was using the knowledge and skills I had learned in doing the visual effects for television and applying them to video game cinematics, where again, it was more just fun, like lots of military hardware, whether it's current or futuristic and sci-fi, just doing fun, cool stuff. And that's what I did for them. We on the Command & Conquer series and some other stuff, and they did a space game, being able to do bring all my little gags to the table and things I had learned to that franchise, and had a lot of fun there. It was a short run, 2.5, 3 years, about as long as my Foundation one, and then that's when I ended. Then I went to Zoic Studios and spent a long time there.
Yeah.
So what made you leave Foundation?
So Foundation, the reason, I mean, yeah, it was the first place I went, and I, of course, had developed a lot of really close friends and family type feelings for that place. There was, I think, because my move from Michigan to LA, just being dropped into that lifestyle of visual effects and the turnarounds, it really, I think, kind of wore me out faster than I thought. Like it really affected me. I don't think I was mentally yet mature enough to handle that.
Mm.
And I kind of felt like I just wanted to get out. We had they had just gotten they'd just been awarded the Starship Trooper they had just been awarded the Roughnecks Chronicles, the Starship Troopers show. And that was going to be a big deal because it was a multi-episode, potentially multi-season, completely CGI action show based on the Starship Troopers novel as a series. And you would think, well, that sounds like a dream come true. You're going to completely CGI show, and this is high profile. Everyone wants to watch this. Kids and adults want to watch it. And they're going to build all these teams, and they naturally were approaching a lot of the veterans. It's funny to say veterans, considering 2 years, 3 years there. But look, you've been in the trenches now for 2 to 3 years. You know what's going on. So they approached a number of us to be leads for teams that were going to try and get these episodes done. And they approached me, and they were like, "Hey, so we want you to lead a team. We're going to have lots of teams, but we want you to lead a team of guys and gals, and you're going to jam out these episodes, and let's go, let's get it done. It's going to be a lot of work." And it was weird. I think I just kind of mentally snapped. I was like, I don't know if I can do that. I just don't know. The pacing of this is really, and you'll hear this a lot from people who work in film and come to television. They're really shocked at the pacing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the same now, but back then it was. So we'd have a lot of film people that unfortunately just wouldn't last because they couldn't handle the pacing. Well, I was already in that pacing, and it was already starting to affect me. And when the Troopers thing, as happy as I was for the company to get that, I couldn't see myself doing it. I thought, I'm going to break down. I'm not going to be able to handle it. It's too much, the stress. And besides, I've gotten this amazing offer to come out to Vegas and get to work on all these fun projects and titles that it's not just going to be the same thing over and over again, like the Trooper show was going to be, and get a chance to see another part of the country and meet new people. And was a big motivation to finally just decide, all right, well, I think I've enjoyed my time at Foundation. I wish everybody well, but I need to move on and try something else. And that's how I ended up in Westwood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can completely relate to that. Completely relate. I think it's not an uncommon story with most entertainment industry, VFX people, or CG people, animators. I know a lot of them that have had enough. You just get to the point where you're just having had enough.
Yeah,
you just want to change. You need to change.
Yeah, I mean, I came there when I was 23 years old, and at this point now I was 25 or whatever, 26, and I was just nonstop, and I needed to come up for a breath, and it wasn't going to happen staying at a visual effects company in Hollywood, so I needed to change venue. And in fact, the change of venue to Vegas at Westwood was very enticing, and when I got there, it turned out to be very fun. And I really thought that was going to be possibly it for me. Like I was going to stay there because the people that I was working with there, they'd been at the company for 17 years. And it was just a really fun, welcoming environment, and learning new stuff and getting to kind of coming full circle to video games. Like now I'm, I used to play video games, and they're what got me involved in doing art in the first place. And now I'm working on video games for a company that makes games that I played, especially growing up, as a kid, as I say, played. And much like when I went to Foundation, getting to work at the company that did the shows that I watched when I was a younger person. So it was a neat time. And why would you have left that, Q, if you had so much fun at Westwood Studios? Because Electronic Arts came in and does what they do.
Oh yeah.
And they bought the company and eventually shut it down. To keep it at its most simplest, that's what happened. And I was out of work, so I had to scramble to find work. And guess what? That brought me back to Los Angeles.
But the Zoic in that case then.
Not to Zoic though. There was a little Zoic didn't exist at that point. So when
Oh,
I'd
okay.
come back. Yeah, it was Zoic at that point was still part of another company, and they were working on forming their own shop. So I spent about a year working at Digital Domain,
Oh,
yeah, in Venice, California. I worked with that's where I would come to work with John Allardyce and Kyle Toucher again. Aram, here I'm naming names. I said I wasn't going to do that because I'm going to leave people out. Chris Blythe, um, Ronan, I forget his real name, but but all these great, super talented folks, and some of them I had worked with at Foundation, and they had since moved on as well, and we're at Digital Domain, and we all got pulled together as a team to work on the Adidas legs commercial for David Fincher.
yeah,
So
I
it was
remember that
pretty
one.
pretty high profile gig, and to be able to work with Fincher was awesome. And again, I was, I'm low man on the totem pole at that point, coming, from a video game company now, had been out of the Hollywood system for a couple of years, and I was brought on, guess what, to model. Oh, it's like,
How
oh boy, I
fun.
love modeling. So I was learning how to do what they called at the time photogeometry or photogrammetry modeling, where
Mm.
they'd shoot all these photos, and then I would kind of cut the photos up in Modeler and make them three-dimensional things. And I mean today, of course, you would model something and take all your set photos and just map them on there. But we kind of did the inverse. It was like they shot a bunch of stuff, and then we'd slice it up and make it 3D in Modeler, and then put that prop in the shot. So I did a lot of model and texture work on that. I did some effects animation type work using I think it was Motion Designer for some cables on the rig that was above the Adidas legs. And that was a really fun project. And that was one I did work on. That's where, if you see my finger, we got a Clio for that. And that was a lot of fun to get a statue and for commercial, which is really hard to get nowadays. So that was really, it was really nice to do that after all the work I spent. I had a lot of long hours in that commercial.
Yeah,
And
I guess. How many were
it
you
was
on
a
that
fun,
project?
sorry?
How many were you on that specific commercial?
So yeah, there was a number of, oh my gosh, there had to be 8, 10 people on that commercial, I believe.
Oh,
I mean, I could be completely wrong on this, but it felt like, I'm trying to remember dinner, because what they would do is they would usually cater in dinner, and we'd all sit around a table, and
mm.
it seemed like 8 to 10 people. That's how I'm remembering it.
Yep.
And it was a mixed team of Maya artists and Lightwave artists. So the
Yeah.
Maya guys were doing the John Allardyce and Kyle were doing like the bulk of the previs, doing the animation, actually making the rig and the things do its things, and then the Maya guys would come in and spice it up and add in the actual rigged legs and all the final bits of animation, and then the Lightwave guys would then go in and actually render it.
Yeah.
And this is back when Digital Domain had their before Lightwave, I guess before Lightwave officially had it, Digital Domain had their own HDR rendering method, their SGI 64-bit file format, and of course their early alpha beta version of what would become Nuke, and this whole pipeline to this high dynamic range rendering. And while the final output, of course, back then was still SDR, at least the source rendering and compositing was all handled in HDR space, or floating point space.
Yep.
That was a fun. I didn't really understand any of that back then. I was like, okay, I'll just keep doing what I do, and you guys will tell me. And then, of course, now it's turned into what it was. It was like, I just push buttons, man. I don't know what it does. But yeah, so I stayed on. Yeah, I stayed on a little longer. So after the Adidas thing ended, they were happy with my work, and they let me work on a couple more commercials. But I never did end up getting hired staff there. It's very difficult to get hired staff at Digital Domain back then, unless you were like complete and total rock star. Which they liked they appreciated my work, and they compensated well, but just wasn't quite enough to keep me going. And that's when I transitioned to Zoic Studios. But at that time, Zoic Studios was, I believe, around 13 people or so, and it was in a small, little, tiny building on the Gower lot in Hollywood, California, and they were sharing a server with Eden Effects across the street. So
Eden,
Eden Effects, who
yes.
was working on Star Trek Enterprise at the time, and Zoic, who was ultimately working on the pilot for Firefly, and then of course the show Firefly at the time.
Yeah.
They were both on the Gower lot, and I believe they like ran an Ethernet cable across the sky or something to connect the two together. It was crazy. So it was really nice because again, a lot of familiar faces at early Zoic, people I recognized from my Foundation time.
Yep.
And it was a small place. It was very much like Foundation. It was a very tiny shop. The server room was made out of wooden 2x4s. Like they just put together a bunch of wood and threw computers on it. I was like, wow, this is neat. And we're doing the show Firefly like this. And of course, I come in there, I sit down and start working on Firefly shots. And what does Q do? He starts doing everything in camera.
Yeah.
So I remember they come over and they look at my work. Like, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing the shot. It's done. Here, I put it. It's all in camera. I put film grain on it and softened it and did all that. And there's like, no, don't do that. We have compositors. We have compositors for that. We need you to just light it and animate it, light it, render it, make it look good. But then we're going to render out the passes and we'll have compositing put it together. And I was like, oh, well, that's helpful actually. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that did take a lot of the stress off the process. And then eventually, of course, Zoic did secure their now famous building in Culver City, the big warehouse, and we became a more properly kitted out effects studio, and completely dove into that process. Where now I was a 3D artist, and then we had compositors. So I'd finally entered that time where you did 3D, and then you gave it to 2D, and that conveyor belt system, kind of worked a lot better and was more efficient to get stuff out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you worked on CSI, and then you moved on to another project. You said at Zoic.
Oh, so yeah, that was. I mean, of course, I worked on in between there too, the Firefly, and then Battlestar Galactica, of course, the big one, and I did a lot of effects work on Battlestar. Again, they leveraged me and my ability to do effects work. A lot of times, if something had to blow up or we needed rigs of ships that could be cloned and duplicated, that was me, blowing them up using MDDs and giving the rigs to the other artists so they could just toss them in their shots and start popcorning ships, as I called it.
Okay.
But even then, the effect, like one of my early shots was for the miniseries where we show the space station, the wide shot, and there's the space star behind it, and it sends the missiles and blows it up. So my task on that shot was to blow it up. Now, what does that mean? That means somebody else modeled that space station. Somebody else actually modeled the chunks and the morph targets to make it look all blown up. And somebody else animated that shot. So that's how much we would break down these shots, per when I said multiple artists work on a shot. And on that particular one, I was handed all this like a completely done shot. Like, here's the camera, here's the bulk of the animation. Now activate all the morph targets and chunks and make them do something and add flames and explosions and fire and things. And that's what I would do. And I would do that repeatedly for multiple shots on Battlestar Galactica. It was fun. It was a fun time. But then, it moved on to CSI. And then after CSI, we just kind of had a lot of stuff. There's a lot of random shows. We did a show called Falling Skies. Did work on...
Oh, yeah, that one, yeah.
Show called Fringe and Flash Forward and Dollhouse, Terminator, Sarah Connor, Chronicles. I mean, we did so much stuff. And so
yeah, that's
so many
true.
shows we were working on that I would kind of just I'd become that tool where he was really good at this certain thing where he's really fast and he's quick and you can kind of just give him what needs to get done and he gets it done. He'll need support here and there, especially with modeling. Just let him do his thing. And that's kind of where I kind of ended up at Zoic in the end. So after a lot of the people I'd gotten used to working with on the teams there at Zoic, they started to peel away and go to other jobs and other adventures, and we kind of drifted into our little areas where we'd find more success later on. And I kind of hung out at Zoic in my little Q box, as I called it, and just did my thing for the various shows that they would find something for me to do, which was allowed me to work on a lot of stuff. That's why I don't remember most things I've done because it was a lot of different shots for a lot of different shows.
So when you were at Zoic, was it predominantly a Lightwave shop?
So yeah, while at Zoic, pretty much everywhere I've been, except with the exception of the Westwood Studios place, almost exclusively Lightwave. Yeah, I was working Lightwave. Was the show exclusively Lightwave at Zoic? Not most of the time.
No, the Zoic as a studio was Zoic as a studio predominantly a Lightwave studio, or did they use other tools?
Okay, yeah. So Zoic Studios was a mixed studio. It was Maya and Lightwave.
Right. And the artists that worked in the studio, predominantly Maya artists, or was it predominantly Lightwave artists that worked there?
It was in the beginning. There was definitely more Lightwave artists in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the Maya side started to grow. And there was a lot of sharing. We had a lot of great pipeline tools that allowed Lightwave and Maya to work together. Custom tools that really made that process more smooth. But yeah, with time, as the years ticked by, it was obvious that the Maya side of the shop was growing in larger numbers versus the Lightwave. And I guess kind of I alluded to that when I said that some of the people I had gotten used to working with kind of drifted off or moved on to other places. A lot of those people who moved on and drifted off were the Lightwave guys. So it was, I mean, the thing with a shop like Zoic, when they first started off, they were kind of small, and I was like, oh, just a really nose to the grindstone production type place. But then what happens to any effects shop if they want to work in Hollywood and be successful and make the money that they want to make, and they have to become kind of like, I hate to use the word factories, but they become factories, and they just need bodies in the chairs and people turning out effects. And it's not so much anymore who's inventing some cool new gag or thing. It's like, here's the tools that are out there. Everyone's already done everything. Find people that know it and just sit them in a chair and let's get it done, right? And so it kind of lost some of its boutiqueness and became more of like a production line, which is, I mean, that's not romantic, it's not fun, it's not nostalgic, right? But it's business, and that's what those studios do. They have to make money, and they got to get the content out there, and the shows need their effects work. So, of course, the majority were Maya artists, because that's what the schools were teaching the most, and everyone was using, and that's kind of how that diffusing of Lightwave happened, at least at Zoic.
Was it the same at Digital Domain?
That I don't know. While I worked there, that was a Maya and Lightwave house as well. I only ever saw the Lightwave side of it. I never.
Okay.
Yeah, I was there. I mean, I'd go. I mean, I knew the people on my team that were doing the Maya stuff. I did know them, of course. I did talk to them, but there was like a whole other section of the studio, I think, that was mostly just the Maya guys. But I mean, most of the modeling was done in Lightwave at that time, Digital Domain, which was pretty neat. There was a whole room of modelers all using Lightwave Modeler and doing stuff for the Star Trek movie and Vin Diesel XXX movie went out while I was there. It was neat.
But Foundation Imaging was always going to be a Lightwave studio.
Yeah, Foundation Imaging was always a Lightwave studio. In fact, a gentleman, a very brave soul, came in there trying to pitch Maya, and we all gave him an ear. Let him do his pitch, and we all smiled and shook his hand, said thank you for your time, and then just promptly escorted him out of the building.
But yeah, the interesting thing here is that there was quite a long time where sort of you had like fairly big shops that sort of used Maya for animation, and then you use something called Point Oven to bake MDDs, send everything over to Lightwave for lighting, shading, and rendering.
Yeah, that was very I believe we used Point Oven, but I also remember we had a proprietary tool we used. That did the same type of thing, where it would bake out meshes and particles and allow us to bring them into Lightwave and render them. So yeah, that was for a long time. You would find a lot of studios like that in Hollywood. You'd go to a studio and they're like, yeah, we have Lightwave guys and gals here that are rendering and lighting for us. They do our final output, and the animation team is Maya, but the render team and lighting team is Lightwave.
Yeah, yeah,
And that was pretty typical. I mean, that was common for a long, long time.
yeah.
For good reason too, because the Lightwave renderer kept advancing and was fast, and it loved polygons. You could throw tons and tons of polygons at it, and yeah, it did help that its farm rendering was essentially free. So you could just stack piles and piles of render nodes at a shot or a show and get it out there, get it rendered, and wouldn't cost you as much money.
Well, I wanted to ask the question of, given all your experiences with Lightwave in the studios, and the time that you spent in the industry, do you have a perspective on why you think Lightwave lost position in the industry?
The best thing I could think of, probably the two most common things that would come up. No one was teaching it in the classes. Now that can be a little bit of a chicken and the egg, or catch-22. Well, no one's teaching it because no one wants to hire them. Well, originally there was always Lightwave artists and Lightwave shops, so there definitely should have been schools teaching it, right? I'm not sure why that didn't get pushed more. I don't know if it was a communication issue, or maybe the owners at the time who were running Lightwave not wanting to penetrate the school market harder, or whatever you need to do to make that happen. So with the schools, which studios were becoming more and more reliant on for talent, because the explosion in 3D animation and television was just, the demand was high. Again, like I said, places like Zoic became essentially factories for effects, right? With the lack of schools turning out folks that had Lightwave skills, had a lot to do with it. And yes, I'm very aware of the Dave School, and the Dave School, guess what? Is there a demand? Look how many people from the Dave School have amazing careers now. I mean, they turned out, and they came to Hollywood and found work as Lightwave artists because they were still in demand, and it kept going. But you've got one small school like that versus all the other ones out there that were teaching other software. And then the other thing that would come up often amongst my fellow team members or other people in the business is a kind of a lack of openness, customization or programmability or scriptability. Like, it didn't play well in the playground of the softwares that were out there at the time. I'm not one of those folks who's wise to scripting and programming and coding and SDK and and how all that works, but that was something that would come up too. You'd hear people like, oh, it's so hard to code for this, or it's so hard to script for this. Like, I'm trying to write tools, and it's very easy to write tools for Maya and maybe some of these other packages we're using, but I'm hitting all these walls with Lightwave, and that would, and again, these studios, it's fast turn. They're factories. We got to go, get shots out, move on. They don't, any speed bump, even if it's not that big of a speed bump, can just make them say, forget it, and they move on. And I think that's probably just what led to the eventual, that again, the diluting of Lightwave in that market.
So would you say that there is, there's scope, or there's room, or there's a possibility that Lightwave could possibly penetrate the industry once again?
Well,
and if there is a possibility, what would be the approach that would be needed to do so?
Well, if I knew that, then I'd run the company, right?
True.
Yeah, it's obviously, we're in this era where it's become so dominated by Autodesk and Unreal that it's something like Blender, which has been around forever, rises to the top because folks are looking for alternatives. I mean, Unreal is, yes, it's cheap for a lot of folks, but it's not that cheap once you start actually needing to stick through its requirements for using it in big productions. And of course, Autodesk products are expensive with their monthly subscriptions and whatnot. So of course, something that's free, that's what it took. It took something being free to get people to start looking at other software. And that's what Blender did to try and come up out of it. So people are looking, and people are always have their eye on something else that's out there. And I think if Lightwave confine that again. I mean, it's already got this wonderful renderer, and again, a free renderer. At least the render side of it is free. You can put out as many nodes as you want.
Yeah.
There's that initial cost for the software up front. Okay, and I know that could be an ask, but I think if you show how you're getting all this powerful free rendering, and now you've got a system that's got these new tools and openness. It's easy to integrate it with other software or create bridges to other softwares and allow them to talk to each other. So you're not hitting those roadblocks, and you've got access to the teams they're actively wanting to work with you, maybe in ways that they don't get with those bigger companies. I've heard some folks have horror stories trying to deal with Autodesk support and get features implemented or things fixed. So it's those things that you've got to really double down on to get yourself noticed. And I think if the team really gets out there and puts himself out to say, what can we do for you? What's going to make you want to use our tool besides what we can already offer, like gorgeous rendering that's free on nodes, or hey, we're going to offer, you need service and support, you need us to fix code, change code, add code, help you, that kind of thing. That's the kind of attitude that you've got to. I know it's a higher place to start. It's a lot of work, and once you get punched through that though, and you build that trust with those clients, then maybe you can take it a little easier, so you're not having to run full tilt the whole time. But that initial opening has got to be big, because you've got to get them to say, well, why do I want to pay for this? And what's it going to do for me beyond what you've been saying for the last 17 years, that it's got free render nodes, I mean, I think those are some of the things that they're going to really have to look at, because you're always going to have that monkey on your back of Blender being free. And we all know a lot of the best stuff in Blender, a lot of those things aren't free. They don't cost that much, but they're still not free. And Blender itself is always evolving and changing. They've changed their interface about 3 times in the last couple of years, and it still has some areas that are very, very weak compared to Lightwave. Very weak, actually, and weak enough that I would say I haven't switched to it yet, and I would probably pay for Lightwave over using free Blender, just based on some of the things I've seen with the interface and the support and some of the things it's done in the past. But that's me. I mean, I picked Lightwave, 20 something years ago for that same reason. So, and I still use it today. I mean, I'm at my company I'm at even to this day, we're still using Lightwave. We have a Lightwave and 3D Max group, and I don't even know if I'd say we're 50-50. We might actually be like 60-40 Lightwave Max. So, we've found a great way to work, together and exchange data smoothly, so that it's not that big of a hassle, and everyone gets to use their talents using the tools that they like.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I think the approach that you've described is probably, I have no idea if this is something that Lightwave Digital want to do, but if they really did want to get a foothold in the entertainment industry, I think your suggestions are very good ones that they should probably do. I probably would also back up your statement of having the contacts, making themselves accessible to industry insiders, making sure that they are show a genuine interest in trying to partner up with them. But again, that kind of presumes that they want to move in that direction, and I'm not sure if that's actually what they want to do. But yeah, I would concur. I would concur with that one.
They're going to have to actively hunt down, I would say, in the beginning, smaller places, smaller venues, whether it's a VFX studio or if it's a couple people at home in a garage. You just start with a smaller. I mean, you can try and of course you can go walk into a big studio and say, hi, we're these guys, and you may have heard of us, and we have this great history, and show it to them. But I think they're going to have to actively hunt out and try and get into the smaller venues first, and then work their way up and kind of build that audience again, and show the openness and willingness, to adapt and offer them tools and change things that need to be changed. Otherwise, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a lot of what had already been tried for the last decade or so.
Some of the things that Lightwave have lost a little bit over the years is the wavy way of doing things, as in fast and easy, because I think nowadays it's very hard to invent new stuff. I think that the only thing that you can do right now is to this thing in Blender takes 10 clicks. In Lightwave, it takes 2 clicks. Okay, things like that, maybe.
That's the magic formula. If you can figure out how to make something easy to use on top where it's mostly usable, and then you can drill down into it and do amazing stuff. And I most recently discovered that method working rather successfully when I finally picked up TerraGen. I finally started learning. I needed to do, for the work I do now, I do a lot of stuff in the skies and over landscapes, and TerraGen is just, well, it's pretty. And it's at first glance, it's one of those programs I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take me forever to figure out. But then, you watch a couple of those simple beginner basic videos that at least teach you what the buttons on the main interface do, and how to load and save something or import something. And you realize that it does a lot of things for you at that top level that are mostly deliverable. Like you just click a couple things, flick a couple sliders, and hit render, and you've got gorgeous clouds and sky and maybe some water train down below, right? And then you render it out and you're done. And it's like, hey, that's cool. And you can keep doing that. Now, if somebody gets on you like, well, we need to be able to, we want big poofy clouds to the right of frame over there. Okay, well, that I can't use my automatic tool for that now. I have to actually go to the next level down. So now I need to explore that next level down. How do I add custom poofy clouds, right? And now you're diving in and exposing parts of the program you've never seen before, that next layer down. But it's there. And the layer above is always there still. You can always run back to the easy sliders, right? But then you dive down and you get to the next level, and at your own pace, you start, learning how you can develop your own little mini cloud systems or little blobs of terrain, let's say. And then when it gets down to like, well, now we need this to look different and we want to put a house on it, you go down to the next level. And it's so that you have that ability to keep going down, down, down. And before you know it, you're a TerraGen expert and you can do whatever you want in the program. I'm not that person. I haven't gone that far, but it's that way where it has this very, gosh, that's pretty much all I needed to do, that top level ability for the tools that it has. And then you just work your way down. So if Lightwave, I think, already has that. It has a very easy way. You can just load included tutorial content, demo content. You can load an object in and, hit F9 and you're almost ready to go. You've got a sky, you can have an ambient sky color in there, and you have something that looks pretty in the render. And I mean, there's that, the texture buttons and the light, they're all labeled and they make sense. So you can actually see what they do. But then beyond that, yeah, of course, you start deep diving into things. But yeah, any new tools, especially losing the waviness, as you said, I think that's that weird balance. Again, I don't know the answer to that, because
yeah,
if you want Lightwave to be taken more seriously and be more open, so that people can just do what they need to do with it and use it as a tool, then you have to have that hard, I guess, that that kind of what we're calling hard, like, because it's all the nodes and all the different things you have to do to create something. But on top of that, to write code that will allow you to more automate that process for that user who doesn't need to go that deep, right? So not everyone has a team at home scripting for them to do all that, to take all that back end and make it easy to use, so that the artist can just like click a button and he gets smoke blowing out of a character's mouth. I mean, we see that all the time behind the scenes. I just click this button and smoke comes out of the guy's mouth. Well, that's great for you. And yeah, I just animated around the screen. To get those kind of tools automated for any new tool in Lightwave is important. That's another way to get people excited about it. Like, oh, okay, how is it doing that smoke? Can I do anything? Can I open that smoke up and get into it? Is it standard VDB stuff and grid-based stuff and all procedural stuff? Like, it is. Oh, cool. All right, I can do my thing in there.
Yeah.
Yay. Yeah. That's they need to be able to see that. But at the same time, yeah, the person sitting at home who's just wanting to do a cool volcano with lava squirting out of it wants the button that says squirt lava out of the volcano. I mean, that takes a lot of work on the coder side, the developer side. You got to spend a lot of time doing, putting the icing on the cake type stuff instead of baking the cake.
Yeah.
And that can be annoying for coding.
I actually have a very good example of this. I'm learning Resolve. I'm sitting with DaVinci Resolve a lot. And, it actually has Fusion incorporated into it. And all of if you use a animated title that, this title comes in at the lower third, there's some animation, the text comes there, and then it animates out. Then you have a couple of settings, right? Now, if you select that title and click on the Fusion button, it actually opens up the whole node flow, so you can actually go in and really change everything on like very detailed level.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah, that's a very good example of what I would envision Lightwave become, moving forward with complicated new stuff. I'm imagining the new Geo nodes that are coming might have that sort of layer, hopefully.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's what it needs to be. Ideally, that's what it needs to be. I mean, you do that, and that allows you to back up everything else that we're talking about, the free render nodes and the high quality rendering, and whatever new stuff they happen to do if they dabble in GPU eventually. So those are all weapons to have. Oh, and by the way, here's a bunch of copies for your shop to use for free. Figure it out. See if you like it. I mean, they're just going to have to do investments like that to get folks to notice it. So
yeah, true. What is the number one feature that you would want to see in Lightwave? The number one, like, this is something I really, really want to see.
GPU rendering using the native nodes, or whatever the native nodes need to become to make that work.
Or by the way, are you using Octane nowadays, or are you using a mix of?
I've been almost exclusively using Octane and Lightwave for the last 3 years, I'd say.
Okay. Yep.
It was a really slow transition. I resisted it a long time. Big fan of the CPU. You can still do, I think, this is an objective opinion, of course. I think you can do better looking stuff with native rendering, CPU rendering. You've just got more tools, more flexibility. There's just more flair. GPU rendering has its limits, unfortunately, of what you can do. You can still, of course, make beautiful things with GPU rendering, and the more that gets developed, the more it'll line up. But for a person at home working, trying to compete in this business, or even a small studio trying to compete, the render power that GPU rendering gives is just no brainer. I mean, I have the power of 20 CPUs in my box with one card. I mean, it's ridiculous. It allows me to do my job. So yeah, I would love to see some kind of native GPU rendering to fix the concern over third parties.
Yep. Is there anything we didn't ask that you would like to talk about, or is there anything that we have talked about that you would want to sort of expand on?
Well, I mean, you've asked some great questions, and I'd say that maybe folks want to know, what's he doing now? So I did kind of step out of the step out of the Hollywood. Yeah, I stepped out of the Hollywood VFX world and transitioned more to I guess you could say just media work, doing a lot of work for defense companies, military. Just another side, there's some folks that do ArchViz, folks that do pharmaceutical, medical. I've kind of shifted to the military side, which is kind of a no-brainer considering all my background working with lots of hardware type stuff. It's a very lucrative business, of course, that side of it, and allows me to use my tools, including Lightwave, to continue making fun stuff. Although sometimes, there is that sobering thing that you're making fun stuff, but it's actually real stuff. So you don't get as excited anymore when someone asks you to do a shot where something blows up. You're like, that's what that does.
Why did you leave the industry?
Again, it's just the chaos of it. You do it for so many years. I was in there for 16 years almost. And it's the turnaround and the fact that the most effects studios they just turn into factories, and the hours are long, and sometimes it just doesn't feel all that thankful anymore. And the innovation has been just democratized, where everyone's learning the same thing and they're all using the same tools and they're just passing scripts around to each other, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of excitement there for me anymore. And just too much of a cog in a big machine type feeling that kind of leaves you just feeling, it's a job.
Yeah.
And I like caring more about my work. I like owning my work, knowing it's mostly mine, that I've created it. And yes, I'm working with other folks and they're giving me assets and models, but I get to own my own little mini world, my own little mini Q studio over here type effect. And you take a lot of pride in that side of it, and being recognized for it too. And people recognize when you go above and beyond and push that shot forward, and they really notice it. Like, it's neat to see that reward, not just like, okay, you did the shot, next shot, let's go,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you just the smaller scale of this business that I'm in now, that's what it is. It's hard to get that in the bigger effects world.
Yeah.
Would you return to the industry?
Ooh, I mean, I did briefly in 2017 with Star Trek Discovery. I took a chance to come back and initially do some consulting work, and then some CG supervision type work. But the funny thing is, that experience basically justified my whole reason for why I left the system.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it unraveled, and it kind of became a bit of a typical political mess of just, the Hollywood system. And I was like, yeah, don't need to do this again. So I'm not saying that's going to happen for at any time I would go back into the system, but it just confirmed it. I was like, I had super talented people I worked with on that. We all put our foots forward on that, but the system itself just did choose on you, and that's the kind of what happened with that.
Yeah.
What project are you most proud of that you've worked on, and why?
That's interesting, because that has two answers. Like, CSI, despite me moaning about it, it was a huge era of my life, and it was a show I liked watching, and we were doing so many neat, fun things. It was, it almost became like a meme. People would just refer to like the CSI effect or do a CSI shot. Or I remember there was news stories would come out of people in the courtrooms were frustrated that they weren't seeing CSI shots when they were doing jury duty in court. Like, where's the thing that shows us all the bullet going into the body? It's like, no, that's TV. We don't do that here. So it was that cool era of just, like the whole CSI era. It was on, of course, it was a huge show. They had like 25 million viewers an episode. So everyone was talking about it. That was probably the one I look back the most fondly on. It'd be CSI.
Yeah. I totally understand. Who would you want to see on this podcast?
Angelina Jolie, maybe. Well, we've got. Well, I actually mentioned a bunch of names already. So the people I've worked with that are like just the people that I work with that are like big legends for me. I mentioned like John Allardyce, Chris Sapara, Kyle Toucher. Emil Smith was a gentleman I worked with back at Foundation who had some amazing work and did some great things. Mojo, another great name. He's got a ton of stories. Of course, he'll talk your head off, but he's got a ton of stories. But yeah, those are some of the folks I can think of that have just I worked with, had a great history with, and lots of fun stories. There's, if you want to look at one other aspect of Lightwave, kind of in the in a different venue, but still fun. Like a lot of great movies that came out direct to TV or video. PJ Foley worked at a studio that handled a lot of that stuff, and he has some great stories for those that work. That's still continuing on that era of production too. So that's fun.
Cool.
I just wanted to ask, why did you start Hold and Modify?
How did I start? Oh, Hold and Modify. Hold and Modify began because I had a passion not only for that old wacky computer that got me started in my career, but it was predominantly back then Lightwave dominant. I wanted to show people the history of this software that got my career started and got many people's career started, and how that this software was this powerful back then, and even today it's still out there, and it's just even more powerful, and showing that the Amiga was more than just a games machine. And in the United States, it was actually used more for production and creative work than it was video game work, at least in the places and the spheres that I was in. So that's kind of how that channel started, and then it just spiraled off into getting into all the Amiga toys and just going all down that road.
Well, I must admit, I do love it. I've only recently discovered it, and I actually fallen in love with it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's
a great
some of the
channel.
early videos are very rough, but a lot of my earliest videos are those Lightwave videos, those kind of training videos.
Yeah, it's super cool.
I just have one last question. So your fairy godfather has visited you and said to you, Kevin, you have an unlimited budget. Money is no object. However, you can only spend it on buying Lightwave as a company. This is before Lightwave Digital purchased it. And you say, okay, thank you very much. I'll go out tomorrow and I'll purchase Lightwave from Vizarti. And you do so. With that done, what does Kevin Quattro's Lightwave company look like? What's Kevin Quattro's vision for Lightwave under his leadership?
I think I kind of touched on that a little bit, right? Where I was like, we need to get it in schools. We need to get it in the hands of smaller studios, maybe larger studios. That means giving away copies, offering to plant someone there. Maybe go on a tour of a way to get people exposed to it and show them why and how, and look how things have changed. And just committing to that kind of commitment to, I think, getting it back into schools. Whether those schools, remember, schools aren't just going to a physical building anymore. It's programs online. Those can be free, of course, or they can be behind a paywall. And just making sure the code is being massaged in ways that it's always focused on. We're not trying to lock anything up anymore. Everyone's invented everything. And so it's, what are you protecting bias, right? Let's get the code open, make everything accessible so that the tool can be used. And that way, maybe the upfront cost of purchasing it doesn't factor in as much anymore because it's so configurable and open and great and free render nodes. You can get by all of that. But it's just getting people out there and doing it, getting someone out there and going into those studios or doing video calls with them or sending them copies of the software, downloads for links to the software. And this goes for studios and schools. There's lots of ways you can market for free without having to spend money other than just giving away stuff, But yeah, I'm not saying you give away 1,000 copies, right? You hit some key points, key markets, and get people excited again by it. A nice quality website with the like I said, maybe a paywall after a couple free tutorials, or getting to show off what the program can do, or just something to attract folks to want to look at it again.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, "Oh, it was great." It's one thing to have a bunch of us older timers like say, "Oh, it's a great piece of software. You should use it." It's like, well, we need to show us why, right? Like we need to,
exactly.
need to have the support behind us to let me go to a website. Let me see the videos, the tutorials, and the walkthroughs, and what's coming, and what our plan is, and all that stuff. That you've got to be open and talk, and you got to pound the ground, so to speak.
Yeah.
Do the legwork.
Brilliant answer. Absolutely brilliant answer. Thank you for that one.
And thank you so much for joining this podcast. And thank you so much for taking the time. And I mean, this has been amazing to hear your story and hearing about your career and all that stuff. So
thank you so much. I appreciate it. Great time talking to you folks. And yeah, some of these questions, I didn't have good notes for, but I hope I did well enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can people find you?
Well, I'm not big on socials except for my YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and you go look for Hold and Modify, all one word there, you'll find my YouTube channel where you can leave comments and talk to me. Or if you go to the About page, there's an email. You can always email me if you want to find out more about Lightwave and me and my past. And that's probably the best place to get in touch with me. I don't really do much on that. Not a big socials person. Sorry, no X, no real active Facebook other than Amiga groups. So
proper priorities there. I agree with you. Amiga rules.
League of Rules.
Thank you all for watching and listening to this month's episode. Be sure to tune in next time so that you don't miss out on all the goodies we've got for you. In the meantime, if you have any news stories you'd like us to know about, you can reach us in the comment section or send an email to lightwavedigest@gmail.com with the word news in the subject line. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, share and comment. Your engagement is really important to us, so thanks in advance for your support. So until next month, always light the wave.